welcome to the Old Time Fiddler. You are an old time fiddler. Tell us when you started playing old time fiddle.
Hello, thank you for having me. I started playing old time fiddle in 2015, I think. 2015, 2016, roughly.
Yeah, we'll go with that. And I had the pleasure of becoming one of your fiddle teachers, but I know I wasn't your first fiddle teacher. So tell us like how you went from other styles, classical maybe, into old time, and then eventually you and I met at the Old Town School of Folk Music. So give
Mhm.
everyone that little story.
So I started playing classical music when I was basically a baby, and did that all through college. And then at the end of my sort of college career, when I was still in music school, I got interested in fiddling and signed up for lessons at the Old Town School of Folk Music with Jess McIntosh. And we were just kind of like exploring different styles, but she mostly plays old time music, so it kind of leaned that way. And then as I went to like various camps, I realized that that's the style I wanted to dig into.
And we're going to spend this chat digging into it, but just so people can jump forward to 2025, I've enjoyed watching your like touring and career announcements. You have played with a variety of artists in a lot of adjacent genres. So before we
Mhm.
just talk about old time music the rest of the time, give our viewers just a sampling of some of the people you've played with in the past like year or so, because it's been quite a lineup.
Yeah, I guess like in the last year, the last couple years, like since I moved to Nashville, I feel like is probably a good picture. I've played with an artist named Kelsey Walden. I've played with an artist named Margot Price. A bunch of friends around town. Hannah Juanita, somebody who I play with a lot. Um, a Kentucky artist named Ian No. Just trying to think of like people whose names people might know, but more on the like Americana sort of country leaning side of things is honestly where I get most of my work at this point.
What skills from your old time fiddle immersion do you feel like transfer into those Americana gigs or country gigs versus not so much? Like, how does your old time brain kind of deal with playing in these adjacent genres that maybe have a little bit more money
Hmm.
coming in on the gigs?
Yeah, it's funny. Honestly, the thing about I'm just to like totally absolutely change the subject for a second.
Right.
Like the it's not even financial. Like there's just not a lot of old time work in Nashville. Like when I lived in New York, I
Right.
like made most of my living playing old time music because there were like a lot of square dances, a lot of like events. Anyways, that's just interesting to me that like that
Yeah.
doesn't really exist in Nashville. You would think it would, but it doesn't. So partially that is kind of how I got into these other styles is just like what people needed. But I also really do love country music, especially like a certain it's funny like once you start playing any style of music, you realize how many subgenres there are within that, and country music is the same. Like that's actually a massive umbrella. Um, so like I really enjoy playing like basically more like honky tonk music.
Mhm.
And I feel like the skill that comes the most in handy from old time fiddling is the ability to like sink into a groove because ultimately they're both dance music. Um, so I feel like that's kind of what I bring to the table. And then like I would say touching it on bluegrass when I was in New York has helped me with my like improvising, but I feel like my real strength is like groove, and that definitely comes from the old time background.
Great. I'm so glad you brought that up because the two points of focus for this channel and then my Patreon project with the same name where I do lessons on the topic are playing for dances and
Mm-hmm.
playing in jams. I'd like to start with dances since you mentioned it. Yeah, like honky tonk country music is for like two-step and waltz dancing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Old time music historically square dancing, but often gets played at contra dances because there are fewer and fewer square dances. Let's talk about square dancing for a bit, and then we'll make sure to talk about jamming before our time's up.
Mm-hmm.
do you have any memories of like the first time you had to or got to play for a square dance, and like whether that was easy or difficult or revelatory in any way? Because I've seen other classically trained musicians play their first square dance and notice that like a groove wasn't just like
Hmm.
immediately there and permanent. Do you have any memories of like your first square dance gig or um
Hmm.
yeah.
I guess, well, I guess it's also worth saying that it's not like I like just came out of music school like straight into this with no preconceived notions of the music because I grew up in East Tennessee, and grew up around a lot of square dancing actually. Like I in high school I would go to what was like a contra slash square dance every week.
Oh, cool.
So I was like dancing actually before I was fiddling.
That's all.
And I did take fiddle lessons briefly when I was like in elementary school. And I do think that that also kind of helped me just have some sort of base. But I think the fact that I actually was dancing before I was playing probably made a big difference. And my first, I think probably the first time I played a square dance was probably like they do that contra dance at the Irish Arts Center in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was the first time I played a square dance, and it wasn't even a square dance. It was like a fluid contra slash square dance. And I don't know. I'm not sure what my first like musical impression was. I guess I because it was maybe more of a contra dance than a straight ahead square dance, there's still a lot of like kind of ebb and flow that happens in contra dance playing. So I think I was like focused on the like arc of the dance,
Yeah.
um, which maybe distracted me from the groove aspect. But yeah, I don't exactly remember what my feeling was. I remember like it feels very like high stakes because you're like, oh no, like if I stop playing, this dance stops.
Totally. Totally. I have a Zoom student, Tim, who was also on the Patreon. Hi, Tim. And he does a lot of Irish music in Chicago, lives in Oak Park. And he makes this comment when we're working on our old time like private lessons. He'll say, like, the dancers would have fallen over if I had done that at a dance. And I actually really love that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of both very self-aware for us to realize like, oh, that mistake I just made, the dancers at a square dance would not be able to handle it. I would have like brought the whole thing down. It's also kind of funny, and so it's kind of lighthearted, but Tim is totally onto something that at a dance the fiddler needs to just be so dependable.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise the dancers start falling apart, either if not their own bodies, but the figures they're making, and definitely the groove
Yeah.
gets away so quickly. I Like you, I danced before I played. My dad was in a square dance band, and so I would be dragged along to his gigs. And then once I got over not wanting to be there, I started dancing, and then realized how fun the dancing was. I remember when I first started playing for dances, just how physically demanding and exhausting it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like play
Yeah.
that music that we love for so long. And some
Mm-hmm.
callers, you're playing sometimes for like 8 to 12 minutes straight,
Mm-hmm.
or they stop that dance. And if there's a lot of dancers, or it is it's hard to work up the stamina to be a dance fiddler.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like at the end of the night, or even just at the break, just like my arms just being, and my neck and shoulders, and just like I really need to
Yeah.
focus on like being relaxed and efficient with my motions,
Yeah.
because such hard work.
Yeah, you can't have any like tension and make it through it. I actually like I feel like there's a couple things that I notice myself doing, like especially like after a few tunes in a dance where I like often will try to like my variations or whatever you want to however you want to think of them end up just being like, okay, can I just play quarter notes and still get the melody across? And it
Yeah,
actually sounds pretty cool. Like it's totally effective and it gives you a break. And then sometimes I also like will switch to the like Michael Cleveland bow hold. Just like out of like sheer just like I literally can't hold this bow this way anymore. So I'm just like literally like holding the bow playing. They've got like survival tactics.
that is so smart. One thing I'm going to ask every guest on this show is what is a waltz that you like playing at dances? Because in a link below, we're gonna have a link to Libby playing this waltz. I don't even know what she's gonna say yet, but what's a waltz that you love playing at a dance?
Honestly, I am so bad with waltzes, and I always play the Swan and Noah waltz, which I do love, but it's uh it's my go-to, I guess.
Was that composed by future guest Raina Gellert?
I believe so.
I think it's on her Ways of the World album that
Yes.
she recorded as she was like leaving college. Uh,
Yes.
she was making that record. That's a beautiful waltz. Well, everyone, you'll be able to hear Libby playing Raina's original waltz, the Swan Waltz, at the link below somewhere. Um, okay, great. Do you? When's the last time you played a dance? You and I played a dance together in 2024 at the Swananoa Gathering. I was teaching at banjo and mando camp. You were teaching at fiddle camp, and we got to be in a dance band together. But have you played dances since then?
Actually, yeah, the most recent one I played was again at Swananoa this summer. And it was a really fun dance band. It was Bruce Molsky was playing banjo.
I love his banjo playing. I love his banjo playing.
Yeah, yeah. And let's see who else was playing. Daryl Anger was playing fiddle also. John Reichman was playing mandolin. Um, Sharon Gilchrist was playing bass.
Awesome.
My partner, Will Johnson, was playing guitar, and then like John Doyle ended up on guitar, and oh my gosh, there was another fiddle player. Who was it? Oh yeah, Natalia Weinstein was playing fiddle also.
Yeah, when we did that Old Farmers Ball in 2024, Natalia was also up there with you. I
Yes.
remember that, and we had um, Laura Businger and John Reichman, everyone's favorite old time mandolin player. Um, and Kevin Kerberg was the bass player when I did that with you. I was on guitar. Now that I play all three instruments, fiddle, banjo, guitar, my favorite instrument to play at a dance is is a guitar, and then get to hear you and the others play.
Yeah.
You talked about bow holds a little while ago, and one of my patrons on our learning project wrote in, who was this? I think it was Heidi, wanted to know from you, what do you look for in a violin bow or in a fiddle bow? Like let's get as nerdy as possible. This is only for fiddle nerds. What
Sure.
does Libby need from a fiddle bow?
Um, okay, I have a fun bow like show and tell at the end of this, but I look for something that is heavier. I usually go for like bows on the heavier side and on the stiffer side. And I just don't want something that's gonna like collapse on me as soon as I like give it any power. Because I have two bows, my main bow and my backup bow, and I really like my backup bow, but it's great for practicing, but I notice as soon as I am like on a gig or like in a jam and I need to like really dig in, it's like my knees get like knocked out from under me. So I don't like that about it, and I feel like that's kind of a characteristic of bows that are like a little more flexible, from what I've heard people talk about. So I'm usually looking for something like stiffer and heavier, and I want it to have like a really narrow sound, because there are some bows that I feel like just kind of like spread the sound out, and especially like on lower strings, it just sounds like really like like you can't make any like definition happen. So those are kind of my things that I look for.
Okay, let's continue the nerd part of this. What do you look for in a violin for fiddle music?
Man, I'm on like I'm in a funny moment right now where I'm like, I love my fiddle, but I like doubt it often because I think it's pretty hard to play, honestly, and it doesn't speak super easily. And I would say like for playing, and that was okay when it was mostly a classical instrument, but now that it's a fiddle, it's pretty frustrating. Because I think having something that is easy to play, like something that speaks really quickly, and is really responsive, because especially if you're like improvising or even yeah, even on old time music where you're like doing a lot of like little rhythmic things, you don't want to be like fighting your instrument while you're also like thinking on the fly.
That makes a lot of sense. I had a revelation in the era when you and I were getting to know each other and play together. I used to always choose violins based on how they sounded under my ear the first time I picked them up.
Yeah.
But then I started making albums, and they invented this thing called YouTube that I think is starting to catch on. And whenever I would hear recordings of each of those fiddles, I never liked them recorded, even
Yes.
though like on top of it, I liked it. And so the aforementioned Jess McIntosh, who now she's married and her last name is very Italian, and she's a future guest on this as well.
Oh, cool.
I have, I finally, in my Chicago days, realized I needed to stop picking out a violin based on whether I liked the sound of it immediately under my ear. And so I borrowed an instrument. Well, I was trying out an instrument from the sponsor of this show, Seaman Violins in Skokie, Illinois. Thank you, Peter and Noah, for supporting this. Noah gave me a couple of violins to try at the shop, and then I had one or I think two that I brought with me, and I just took to like a week of teaching at the Old Town School. And I will never forget one afternoon in the East Building, so 4545 North Lincoln Avenue. Jess was coming in for some lessons, but hadn't started yet. I was there early testing out these fiddles, and I thought I'd settled on one,
Mm.
and it's right here. Um,
Oh, yay.
we handed it back and forth, and I didn't like it under my ear, but the second I heard her play it, I loved it.
Yeah.
It felt weird to do it, but I said, okay, I'm gonna buy that instrument because every microphone and every audience and every future listening I'm gonna do after I do the playing is
Yeah.
gonna be the thing I like, even though it sounded kind of weird under my ear. And I'm glad I did because this is the first
Yeah.
fiddle I've ever owned where when gets recorded, I actually like it.
Yeah, that's something that is really, I really struggle with. That's also sort of like in the same vein of me feeling like, I don't know what to do about my fiddle right now because, like, a lot of something that I think a lot of people don't think about is like classical instruments are set up to sound good from like hundreds of feet away.
Exactly, exactly.
Not microphone, not mic'd. So my fiddle when you put a microphone right next to it, it sounds terrible. Like, I mean, well, I don't know. That's probably harsh, but I think it sounds terrible. Um, I'm like, I sound terrible. No, but when you put a mic right next to it, you can hear like all the bow noise and like it's like really mid-rangey and like the low end speaks kind of strange. And ultimately, like I basically am exclusively playing these days. Like it's such a treat when I'm not plugged into a DI because I'm playing in so many country bands that I like have to have it has to be a DI, which people don't know what that means. That's like a pickup. So it's like not a microphone. It's a different thing. It like goes in your bridge. So it's sort of like a little bit of a funny thing where I kind of am intrigued by looking for something that is maybe more tailored towards microphones, basically.
Yeah, my trial and error, which was failure, 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 until finally I listened to Jess play this before I decided to buy it. And she had the same response. She wasn't
Mhm.
sure about it under her ear, but when I played it, when on the outside, we both really liked the same one. And to me, it's like,
Mhm.
well,
Mhm.
one of my favorite fiddlers likes hearing it on the outside, and I do too. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna get it. Um, yeah, it's my only advice to everyone watching is take someone else with you violin
Oh
shop,
yeah.
listen to their input because I
Mhm.
kept thinking like only I would know, but
Mhm.
the vantage point of being on top of the fiddle as the musician is you're the only one who's ever going to hear it that way, and everyone else has to hear it out front. And just like Libby said, some instruments speak really well to the back of a concert hall, but don't sound great in a four-person jam or up on a microphone or going through a DI. So you got to think about
Mhm.
why you're getting that violin and if it
Mhm.
does the things that you want it to do and if it sounds the best in those scenarios.
Yeah, and I would say take it home. Like, don't. unless you're really experienced, but I would say even still, like I would not recommend buying an instrument in a shop because most shops have like no sound deadening to them whatsoever. So everything sounds amazing. And then you get home and you're like, wait, I hate this. So I would definitely recommend if a shop will let you taking something home and playing it in a setting where you're like used to playing an instrument also.
This show is sponsored by Seaman Violins. Since 1989, Seaman Violins in Skokie, Illinois has offered a wide range of instruments and accessories that suit every level. Their staff comprises professional violin makers, all graduates of the esteemed Chicago School of Violin Making. Their clientele ranges from Chicagoland school kids to Andrew Bird. You can learn more by visiting SeamanViolins.com. That's SEMAN violins.com. I don't want to eat up too much of your time, but the other half of our topic for the Old Time Fiddler on YouTube and on Patreon is jamming. So I have some questions from patrons asking about jams and then some more general things as well.
Cool.
But let's talk about some jam stuff. Uh, this might be a Matt Brown question because it's not attributed. What did you learn by going to old time jams that didn't come up in like lessons or your individual practice? Because that it adds the whole social dynamic and like the politics of like who.
Oh.
I don't want to like put answers in your mouth, but like you remember like having to figure out like, oh wow, that's what jams are.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would say okay, I'll start with the musical side of it. Musically, things that I learned are this is like feels so, I don't know, funny, but like practice starting tunes at home. Like just like know that you know how to start the tune that you want to lead like really strong because if you call a tune in a jam, you're going to be the one to start it and you're probably going to be playing like like without anybody else on that tune. So that's a good thing to do is like be ready to start a tune by yourself, like with no guitar playing yet, and ideally like feel comfortable enough where like say some guitar player comes along who like doesn't actually know where the beat is or doesn't know what the chords are, that you want to know that tune well enough that you could push through somebody like absolutely like falling all over the tune while you're playing it. So that's like some pretty, starter advice that I think is, I still like, if I'm learning a new tune, I'm like, okay, do I know how to like start this tune strong? Um, Other musical things I learned, speaking to old times specifically, I would say, I would say one of the biggest lessons I ever had was at a camp called Live Oak in Texas, and Tatiana Hargraves was teaching there. And we did this exercise in one of her classes where we like she started a tune and everyone I think closed their eye. She started a tune sitting in the middle of a rug, like a circular rug, and she was like, okay, when you feel ready to come in, like, and everyone had their eyes closed, like come sit on the rug and start playing without without disturbing the waters, basically, without upsetting the groove, or like I don't even want to know that you come in, to be honest. And it was like a 25-person class, and by the end of the tune we were all playing together and it felt really good and sounded really good, and I was like, oh, I actually didn't understand what it meant to listen until this exercise. And I would say that was like the biggest turning point for me with jamming, because that's basically what you want to do in a jam is especially if you're not the lead, like if you're not the one starting the tune, you want to support what's happening and you want to like, you're going to add to it. But like first and foremost, like is the idea of blend, especially between fiddle players, which people talk about a lot. And that's like, you're not coming in to like go head to head with the other fiddle player. It's not like fiddle one versus fiddle two, like who can play the coolest, loudest, notiest version. It's like, can you create this third fiddle sound with the other fiddlers happening? Because that's a way cooler thing to do than fight with the people you're playing with. You're trying to create like a unified thing together. So I would say musically, that was something I really learned about jamming on old time music is how to truly listen. Like it's not, it's a funny thing because I mean, I'd literally been playing for like probably 15, 20 years at this point. And people have been telling me to listen my whole life. And I was like, I'm listening, but I'm not. It's almost like you have to like surrender. Honestly, this is so dramatic, but like you have to like surrender your ego to really listen. Like you're listening without like thinking about what you want to say, if that makes sense.
I can relate so much. For me, it was my experience learning that wasn't in a workshop, but that what an incredible exercise that Tatiana led. I'm also hoping that we'll have Tatiana Hargraves as a guest on this already, but extra now. My experience getting to the same conclusion was as a teenager jamming around home in Pennsylvania and realizing that the only way that I could blend and kind of do that third fiddler that you're talking about. So the fiddler I'm thinking about was probably one of my biggest influences, and I never took a lesson from him. I jammed with him, and then we had a band together, and his name was Rusty Neithammer. And his wife, Nancy Doles Neithammer, is the one who made the Tommy Gerald Boeing Lights video.
Oh, cool.
They were Tommy acolytes. And anyway, I grew up hearing Rusty play and then jamming with him, and then we had a couple square dance bands. And playing with Rusty in particular in jams, I had this revelation somewhere 15, 16 years old that when Rusty was going to start a tune, my job was to kind of forget who I was because he was on
Mm-hmm.
fiddle, I was on fiddle. He started some tune he knew, and he always had his own way of playing everything, which is honestly the goal eventually to like play like you and not like someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I would try and just kind of shut off me and see if I could bow like him even before or during the process of figuring out what notes he was playing. And by getting flipping into that headspace of just like I'm going to match Rusty's bowing, or Palmer Laux was one of my teachers, or any of the other fiddlers around the southeastern Pennsylvania region in that era, like the '90s and early 2000s. Like if I could get into a headspace where they kick off the tune, and I'm just trying to match their bowing, like I'm in a fiddle workshop with my teachers, Bruce Molsky, Brad Leftwich, Raina Geller, where they slowly have us like, okay, follow my bow, but real time, up to speed, not breaking it into phrases. Once I
Mm-hmm.
started trying to do that in jams and kind of pretending I knew the notes and playing very softly, but just like, can I just like bow with them? I I had the same experience. My ego was like had dissipated into the ether, and I was just kind of adding a little bit more fiddle to the mix, but in his style or her style, whoever's leading it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
Yeah.
only when I started doing that that I realized like what jamming meant.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, it's not a cage match between like which fiddler will survive this like this war of ideas and egos. Like no, that's not what old time
Yeah.
music and old time jamming is about. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
huge. What else? You said musical things, and you also alluded that there are other maybe
Mm-hmm.
musical things. What else comes to mind for you?
Well, okay, before I switch gears, I also just want to say like that thinking about fiddle old time jamming that way is also just more fun. Like I would just like invite people to do that because like I feel like it you can make honestly the only time I can't save my experience in a jam with that tactic is if somebody is like actively like being like, no, I'm like gonna play so loud and I'm gonna do this thing and I'm not listening. But it's funny because like it doesn't really matter who you're playing with if you're thinking that way because there's always something to grab onto and like always something to try and something new to learn. So it's just like I don't know, it's just like a more rewarding way to play. And like there doesn't even have to be another fiddler. You can also like zero in on what the banjo's doing and like maybe you'll pick up like a cool little fun thing that like the banjo player's throwing in there that
Yeah.
you wouldn't do because you're a fiddle player. So anyways, that's my spiel about listening. Um, as far as non-musical things, I would say there's all these like unspoken. rules of the old time jam world, which frankly I have become so fed up with that I like don't even really engage with the
Yeah.
community as much as I used to. Honestly, like, and I would say it's not universal. Like, it's funny. I feel like different communities, depending on where you are in the country, have like a different way of doing things. And there are just certain groups of people that I prefer playing with to others because it's a better time,
Yeah.
just socially.
Right.
And I guess like those unspoken sort of rules are like uh, the way you enter a jam or the way you like initiate a jam. And it's funny because I feel like when I first started playing, I was so blissfully unaware of all of that that I ended up in some jams with people who like if I had I known sort of like the rules, I maybe wouldn't have inserted myself.
Right.
And but so that being said, there's all these like funny little rules about like inserting yourself in a jam. And I guess like to be less cryptic about that, that's just sort of like oftentimes if there's a jam that has like two fiddles, a banjo and a guitar, and a bass player, generally that group of people probably considers that jam full, for
Right.
example. And if you're feeling bold and confident, you can squeeze in there with a third fiddle. And I have sympathy for why people feel that way, but I also think that at the end of the day, like we all benefit by people like learning how to play together, and so it's better to be inclusive in my experience. So yeah, I often would insert myself in jams that maybe other people would have considered full, and I feel like people had a good time, so it's all good.
You bring the fun. The one thing that comes to mind, like Clifftop can be a little fraught in that regard.
Hmm.
They don't always handle it well. I haven't been to Clifftop in years, but I still have like memories of observing
Hmm.
or being inside a jam where various things happen. I feel like that hypothetical you just put out, like there's already like two fiddles, a banjo, guitar, mandolin, bass, like that could be finished in terms of like the staffing. What I like to see as just like a member of this old time community that you're a part of and that a lot of our viewers are, what I like to see in that scenario is when the people playing invite observers to.
Hmm.
I feel like that's a beautiful thing to see. And I'm not saying it should always happen.
Yeah.
I have been involved in all three sides of already in the jam, not in the jam, not invited. And then occasionally, like someone's like, "Oh, Matt, can you go grab your banjo?" Because they know, like, I fingerpicked the banjo, and the banjo player is just a clawhammer player, and they know that that alchemy still might work if one banjo is still on clawhammer. But
Hmm.
it's a delicate balance, just like any social experiment. And
Yes.
the old time music community is filled with wonderful people.
Yes.
There are also in those ranks and adjacent there, I have noticed that sometimes the community includes people whose have like a different sense of like social norms or whose
Hmm.
focus isn't so much on social norms and maybe it's more on how
Hmm.
much they love the music, how much they love that tune. And
Yes.
I feel like even though the old time scene I grew up in was very like white, and like for example, there was there were a lot of like neurologically diverse people coming and going. Like it
Definitely.
it wasn't all people who would be classified as neurotypical. And so I know, like looking back, there are a lot of people for whom like there's just a different like filter or
Hmm.
prioritization of like social norms.
Right.
Um and so
Which.
it's just kind of interesting to think about like how inclusive and kind and loving we can be and also listen
Mhm.
and think like, does this jam need me in particular or can I just stand here or sit here and just enjoy watching and listening?
Yeah, and that's kind of like the way to like circle it all together is I think, and I think this is totally fair. A lot of the time I think the reason people have like a funny reaction if someone like invites themselves into a jam is because the first thought is like, okay, if they are inserting themselves here, are they going to also insert themselves musically in a way that like brings this jam down? And so, like, kind of a good defense against that, if you want to be able to like invite yourself into a jam, is being confident that you're a good listener. So, like,
Yeah.
it's like if you yes, you might be like, "Can I play with you guys?" And like for a minute, everyone might be like, I don't like maybe weird about it." It's like I know that when I sit down, I'm not going to like absolutely blare whatever my fiddle thing is into people's ears. I'm like, okay, well, like I promise, whatever you guys having going on, I'm just gonna like hang back. It's all good. Like I know how to listen. So like if you know how to listen, like you're probably gonna continue to like elevate the jam instead of like bring down whatever's happening. So it's the bummer is when someone comes in and they're like, "Can I join your jam?" And then they're just like, "Meh," or like whatever, not part of what's happening, and you're that is kind of disappointing. So you're like, no.
Yeah, there is when this works well, I feel like it uses that like onion strategy that some camps like employ on purpose. That like maybe a jam
Mhm,
starts organically, and you're
mhm,
there with John Reichman and Bruce Molsky and Natalia, and you've got a little jam going, and then some other people wander up and they're like, "Oh, I think I can add to it," and they like sit in like a circle around you, and they
mhm,
lightly play, and then maybe there's some scooching, and like it kind of grows, and then
mhm,
someone has to go to the bathroom, or like their kid is screaming, and they leave, but then someone else comes, and there's like this very the most beautiful old time jam, like if we look at the life cycle of that jam, I feel like start small, it might grow, and then maybe by the end it's small again, and maybe none of the initial people are there anymore, but like the integrity of that like
mhm,
musical project was just through the whole experience as it like expands and contracts because people are
mhm,
just like adding what they can, but not like stomping
mhm,
on people's vibes. And it's like I've seen like a jam go on for hours and kind of shift personnel because everyone involved understands like that we're in on this together. This is
mhm.
a glory for life. I'm not trying to hide that. Like what if we work together and listen to each other instead of like murder everyone? Like just a thought. Anyway, um, yeah,
Exactly.
I'm getting incendiary now. Speaking of jams, like what is a tune that Aiken had a great phrasing of this. He was like, what's a tune you can still play when you're completely exhausted? Which I kind of thought of like, what's a default like you're just like in a jam and like you can call blah 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 in the key of blah.
Mhm.
What's one of those tunes for you?
Like for me personally, like
To be in particular, yeah. Like what's one of your go-to? I'm exhausted, but I can still slay this one.
I would say I usually like I feel like Old Buzzard never does me wrong. I love that tune. And let's see, what else? That's definitely like a lot of G tunes. I would say a lot of my G tunes are kind of like my go-tos. Honestly, Fire on the Mountain, which you know I love. Aisha
Which Fire in the
Mondays.
Mountain?
Aisha Mondays, Fire on the Mountain. Yeah, that's like always my go-to A tune. Yeah, I would say like I'm trying to think of like a D tune. So that's like my G A tune, a D tune, Little Gal Fool Ya. I love that tune. That's like my go-to D tune, which is a
Which
Joe
of
Birchfield tune.
Cool. Of those three, can I select Old Buzzard as the one that we link to below as like your like go-to G tune?
Yeah.
And people will be able to click on that link and watch Libby play it once or twice. I Bruce Greene, I think, told me, Bruce, if you see this and I'm wrong, I think Bruce said that Monday's first name is pronounced Isom,
Isom, yes. Yeah, I did.
which
Yes.
I said Isham with like a sh sound for years, and then I saw Bruce again, and pretty sure he corrected me to Isom,
Mm-hmm.
Isham. His Fire in the Mountain, I just stumbled across it so many years ago. I'm old now. I'm 41 as of this recording. It was like 20 plus years ago. I think it was when Jeff Todd Titan's Kentucky Fiddle Tunes book came out,
Mm.
and there's a CD in the back with just a selection of some of the tunes he's transcribed, and I think
Oh,
that
cool.
Monday Fire in the Mountain might be on there. Anyway, I got obsessed with that tune. It's why it's on my first album. And
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of shocked to realize at the time, 2005 is when Beverly Smith and Paul Brown and I recorded that one. I was kind of surprised to realize in 2005, sorry, in 2005 that like no one was playing it. Like everyone was playing like I think there's a much more common one that the Highwood String Band had recorded, and
Mm-hmm.
like bluegrassers when they think of Fire in the Mountain, there's a certain one. As soon as I heard Ice and Monday's version, I was like, that tune was just over for me. Like, I am gonna always play the Ice and Monday Fire in the Mountain, which is why I probably showed it to you or encouraged you to learn it off of the source recording. Yeah, I want to make that tune before I die, like not the alternate version, but just like a very
Yeah.
viable choice in the key of A.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to slight the one that goes to the four chord over and over again. Like that's fun and it's a party vibe, but I feel like the Ice Monday
Totally different tune. Yeah.
it's just like a beautiful treatment of fiddle music, and we should all know that so we can all play it together at a jam with Libby where we listen really hard.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite tunes. And it's funny, I actually feel like still when I call that, it's not a super known tune. I feel like, yeah, especially maybe more so now, but yeah, I'm out there helping spread the gospel of Isa Monday's Fire on the Mountain for
I
sure.
so appreciate that. Tell everyone, send this to your friends and neighbors. We should all learn that. I have a lesson video where I teach that,
Oh, cool.
so people could learn it that way. All right, I want to be respectful of your time. We have one more question. This is from fiddler and banjo player named Aiken, who's a Patreon fiddler and supporter of this project. He asks you, who's someone who's fiddling you really admire? And this will be the last question.
Ooh, fun question. I'll keep it old time just because otherwise it's like ugh, there's so many fiddlers. Um, I I've always really loved Stephanie Coleman's fiddle playing. I'm a big fan of her playing, and then I also you asked for one, but I just like can't. I also love Bruce Greene's fiddle playing, who you mentioned. I just think he is like a magician. I've heard people call him a fiddler's fiddler, and I think that's true.
Yeah,
Where like if you aren't a fiddle player, it's easy to miss what's so magical about his playing, and if you are, it's just like mind blowing. Like there's so many videos and recordings I've listened to him still where I'm just like, how is he doing that? It's crazy.
I know, I know. It's baffling that someone, I think he's a wizard. Like I really
Yeah.
do. I feel like there's something magical about him as a person and as a musician. And yeah, uh, I'm glad you mentioned Stephanie Coleman. She's going to be a guest on this show.
Yay.
If you could ask Stephanie one old time fiddle question through this show for me to ask her in her chat, what would you ask Stephanie Coleman?
Hmm. I guess I guess something I've always like admired about her playing is how much she does, and this is also what I love about Bruce Greene's playing. Like her bow is so quiet, like she does so much with so little. Like it's not like the big flashy circle bowing that we see people do that's like she's really it's I just sometimes it's like she just pulls one bow and like somehow like a whole thing happens there. So I guess I'd be curious to know sort of like how she thinks about her playing or what her big like bowing inputs are.
That is that's a beautiful question to her. And I totally agree. Like her economy of motion
Hmm.
is like next level.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like you talked about Tatiana Hargraves too, and I feel like Tatiana uses more bow than a lot of people do and does so with complete control and
Hmm.
power. And so the question is like why why can both approaches work so well? That's the
Hmm.
question. Because I feel like if we put Tatiana and Stephanie next to each other,
Totally.
I would love everything I heard, and we would
Totally.
see different bow distributions.
Hmm. Yeah, and just like more, but like I feel like Stephanie uses a lot of like she just every move that she makes is effective, you know. So it's like it's not that she's slurring everything together. Even it's just like I don't know. It's just really like straightforward, and it does the job, and it's cool, and I like that.
Same. Well, let's leave it there. Libby Weitnauer, you are an old time fiddler, and thank you for coming to visit and chat on today's show.
Yay! Thanks for having me.